All right, let's talk about a skill that, let's be honest, you probably have on your resume right now. We all do. But today, we're going to tear it down. We are tackling the multitasking myth.
So let me ask you straight up, are you a good multitasker? I mean, really think about it for a second. We're all juggling emails during meetings, right? Or texting while a movie's on, listening to a podcast while we work. It's just how we operate these days, isn't it?
Well, I hate to be the one to break it to you, but according to Professor Anthony Salina, you're not. In fact, none of us are. He says the biggest misconception is that we are actually doing two things at once. True multitasking is a myth. So what we feel like we're doing, that's actually something completely different. Okay, so to really get why this is a myth, we've got to look under the hood, right into the wiring of our own brains. It turns out our mind is less like a superhighway and more like a single lane road.
A supercomputer, it can do true parallel processing. It's handling a million complex things at the exact same instant. But our brains, we're what's called a serial processor. We can only truly focus on one task at a time. That feeling of being a master multitasker, that's just your brain playing a trick on you. It's just switching back and forth, super, super fast. And there's a really cool scientific reason for this. Researchers call it the central attentional bottleneck. I mean, picture a soda bottle, right? You can turn it completely upside down, but only so much liquid can get through that narrow neck at once. Well, that's exactly how your brain works with the big stuff, like making a decision or trying to remember something. Only one of those thoughts can squeeze through that mental bottleneck at a time. Just one. So, all of this constant, frantic switching, forcing one task after another through that tiny bottleneck, it isn't free. Not by a long shot. It comes with a price tag. And that price affects our energy, our memory, and how well we actually do things. Okay, so what are these costs? First, there's a physical one, a metabolic cost. Every time you switch, you burn through more of your brain's fuel, the stuff called oxygenated glucose. It's why you feel so drained after a day of multitasking. Second, it absolutely tanks your memory. Your attention is so scattered that you're not really locking information in, which makes it way harder to remember later. And finally, your performance just nosedives. Your reaction times get slower, and you start making way more mistakes.
So, how bad is this performance drop? Well, get this. Research found that the average delay, what they call the multitasking cost, is 797 milliseconds. That's almost a full second of lag every single time your brain switches tasks. Now, you might think, a second? Who cares? But trust me, in the real world, a second is an eternity.
And here's where it gets really serious. Let's put this in a real-world scenario, like driving. A delay of just half a second. And remember, the average cost is way more than that. But just half a second at 30 miles per hour adds over 20 feet to your braking distance. That's the length of a big SUV. That is absolutely the difference between hitting the brakes just in time and a devastating accident. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. Okay, I get it. But what about my friend Sarah? She seems to juggle a million things at once and is amazing at it. And you know what? You're not wrong to think that. It turns out not everybody pays the same multitasking tax. The human element makes things, well, really interesting. Just look at this data right here. These graphs show exactly what I'm talking about. See that gap between the first dot and the second dot for each group? That's the cost of multitasking we've been discussing. And look how different that gap is for different people. It's wild. It shows that your background, your habits, even your personality, they all have a massive impact on how much you lose when you try to juggle tasks. So, what's the magic ingredient here? It all boils down to something called executive functions. Think of it as the CEO of your brain. It manages your focus, keeps you from getting distracted, and helps you switch gears smoothly. And the research is crystal clear. Groups who struggle a bit with these functions, like folks with dyslexia or people who score high on neuroticism, they pay a higher price for task switching. But on the flip side, groups with supercharged executive functions, we're talking serious video gamers, people who are bilingual, even folks who've had their morning coffee, they pay a lower price. They aren't actually multitasking, mind you. Their brains are just way more efficient at that rapid-fire switching.
Let's just zero in on one of these to see how big the difference can be. Here we're comparing the multitasking costs for non-dyslexics versus dyslexics. Look at that jump. We're talking about a difference of 248 milliseconds. That means the performance hit for the dyslexic group was over 36% bigger. That's a huge difference.
And if we bring that right back to our driving example, that extra quarter of a second lag adds almost 11 more feet to a car's braking distance. This just goes to show you these little differences in how our brains are wired can have incredibly real and incredibly serious consequences out in the world. Okay, so if true multitasking is a myth and trying to do it is so draining and inefficient, what are we supposed to do? Well, the good news is there's a better way. We can actually learn to work with our brains instead of constantly fighting against their natural design.
And Professor Solly lays out 4 pretty simple steps to get started. First, time blocking. Carve out chunks of time where you do one thing and only one thing. No exceptions. Second, kill your distractions. Seriously, be ruthless. Put your phone in another room, close all those extra browser tabs. Third, break it down. A giant project is overwhelming, but small, manageable, single-focused tasks, you can totally do that. And finally, number 4, know your own energy. Are you a morning person, an evening person? Schedule your most brain-draining work for when you're naturally at your best.
And this really brings us to the bottom line, perfectly summed up by Professor Sally one last time. He says, you're not being more efficient by trying to do multiple things at once. You're actually slowing yourself down and diminishing the quality of your work. It's so important to get that. The goal isn't to become a better juggler. The real secret to being productive is to focus deeply on one single thing at a time.
So I'll leave you with this final thought. Just for a second, forget that massive to-do list that's probably running through your head. Instead, ask yourself this. What is the one thing, the one single thing that you're going to give your true, complete, undivided attention to today?